Assembly almost took away your right to getting original documents and not just copies of documents. Sometimes you want to inspect the original, and that was House Bill, do you remember which, 3796, which the governor vetoed. Beware if House Bill 3796 rears its ugly head in the veto session, because that means the General Assembly wants to override the governor's veto, and that takes away your rights to ask for public records, and it adds costs to public records, and it hurts your ability to get originals. So just want to put that up there. Thanks. Yes?
Really quick, so you're saying that all public records are free, or?
No, I'm sorry. The first 50 pages of copies of public records, black and white copies, whether it's 8.5 by 11 or legal size, those are free, and beyond that, government bodies may charge you 15 cents.
Okay.
For electronic records, it should be free. Usually it's an attachment to an email, but if they give you like a disc or something, they can charge you like $1, whatever it costs for that CD.
And that's in any government?
All public bodies in Illinois.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
All right, cool. So I just want to pick up where Marion left off, but I want to get all the way to Scott, because I want to hear about scraping. What's that?
You have to go to plug it in.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was plugged in. I think the two main things to keep in mind are, as Mariam has suggested, read the statute. It's not that long, and it is the letter of the law. It is 10 pages, so if you want to understand truly the basics for when you do get denied, because you will get denied at some point if you're asking for something interesting or important, you can always refer back to the letter of the law. And also use CAC as a resource. They're wonderful, they're amazing, and in the state, they're probably the most versed in the actual application of the law. The other thing I will echo Mariam on is basically FOIA the FOIAs. If you don't know what's there, if you don't know what the agency keeps, if you don't know what people are normally asking of a government agency, filing a FOIA to ask for all of the FOIAs that have been submitted is a totally legitimate request. And if it gets denied, it's stupid on the part of the government agency, right? It's just so blatantly stupid that not even in this state would they do that. Highly recommend doing that, because that also, as you're both learning the statute itself, you're also getting a sense of what kind of data is available. Trying to... How many of you are in the nonprofit sector? For-profit sector? Okay, media? Non-media? Everybody else? Okay, cool. All right, so this, I'll make this available after the presentation. Just to pick up where Mariam left off, this is a very unscientific calculation, but basically 80% is knowing what's there. There is a ton of stuff online. Forrest may talk some about it. They've done some amazing work with what's already available. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. You do not have to invent the wheel. In many cases, if you start with what's available, there's another session here on regional data portals. The city of Chicago has an amazing data portal that can give you a good basis on what kind of information is kept and what formats they're kept in. Some government agencies will try to obfuscate and send you PDFs of images and image documents that you then have to repurpose and scan. But a lot of this information is available in very easy to sort and calculate comma delimited formats, Excel formats, map files. So 80% is really knowing what you're looking for and what you want to do with it. 5% is asking. There is a very specific way that you can ask government agency for records. You can call them. I'm a huge fan of emailing. I'm a huge fan of making a record of your request, because then there is a record of the transaction. If you asked and they gave it to you and that was it, nobody coming behind you will ever know that that actually happened, right? And so whenever you can, sending an email, being as clear as you can, and using the form. The AG's office does actually provide a form that you can fill out, or like a template. 15% is waiting. last year at the Chicago Headline Club FOIA Fest, we learned from the BGA that waiting can pay, actually. The BGA is a good example of an organization. It's called the Better Government Association. They do a lot of watchdog journalism. And they've gotten so successful at suing for FOIA that it's a line item in their revenue. So oftentimes, government agencies will just block you. They'll just stonewall you because they think this is jokey public and this person doesn't have legal resources. So if we just say no, or we just say, oh, but it's going to take a while, they'll just go away. That's why Mariam is around, that's why the BGA is around, that's why a lot of us are here. But oftentimes, if you have a legitimate case and you have a legitimate argument and the documents are legitimately public, your last recourse is often to sue. And in those cases, if you win, you can make money. Here are a couple of examples. Easy Gimmies, how many of you are familiar with EveryBlock? Chicago Crime? These are sort of basic examples of how you take public data and make them interactive outside of just a spreadsheet. The BGA, I've got a couple of screen grabs here. Crime is an easy topic for data. Licenses, contracts, personnel public salaries. The BGA has a website that's looking up payroll information. So if you were to search for last name Diaz online right now, it'd give you every public employee in their database by their last name and what they make and where they work. What's the most popular dog in Chicago? This is silly, but it speaks to the actual essence of what you're trying to do with public data and what you can do with public data. This is a project that DNA Info did based on a project that WNYC did. And basically, they submitted a Freedom of Information request to the city clerk's office to obtain dog license information. That's easy, right? The stuff you don't know that exists or never thought to ask about. This is my fun one. Oftentimes, data sets are compiled annually. So this is a perennial gift. It keeps on giving. You can compare over time. Illinois has a traffic stop study that they have been maintaining since, I believe, 2003. And this is a record of every traffic stop in the state of Illinois by a law enforcement official. They take down the make and model of the car, the year, the geographic location. They redact the cops' information, which was a serious issue back in, I think, 2009 when they were looking to reauthorize this data set. But that, when I worked with Rui at the Chicago Reporter, we used that for the basis of a story that showed that Latinos were disproportionately stopped in Chicagoland. And last year, the ACLU used that as a story to show that black people are more often stopped than they actually are a percentage of the population that's driving. The Illinois Attorney Review and Disciplinary Commission, mouthful, is the agency department that licenses or revokes the licenses of attorneys in the state of Illinois. So if you're a bad lawyer, these people should know about it and should take away your license, right? If they've done so, that's a public record. Their website is a hot mess. We are looking at ways to make that a little bit simpler to use. But that's a record that's out there that you may not have known existed if not for going through and finding out what records government agencies maintain. And also when you're doing a story or you're doing a project or you're trying to get some sense of a specific issue, doing your research around that topic. LM2 data. So for those of you who are not in the nonprofit sector, how many of you know about the existence of a record called 990, which is an IRS record? Yes, no, maybe? So a 990 is basically a tax record for a nonprofit organization. It's what they file with the IRS to prove that they are receiving money, spending money, and to some degree what they're spending it on. The LM2 is the 990 for a union, right? So let's say you're a pipe fitter who's docked $14 a paycheck in dues and wants to know where that's going. It's called LM2, right? How much does the shop steward make? right? Where do the dues go? How is that money spent? That is even worse than the IARDC, but it's a tremendous opportunity to get an insight on how unions are financed and what they actually do with that money. Scraping, and this is what Forrest and Scott will talk about, is a way to automate this data collection. Back in the ancient days of 2009, when you would file a FOIA request for documents, this was very difficult. Today, you can file FOIA requests for records, and once you get those records, if you're good about obtaining them, analyzing them, cleaning them, and ensuring that they're accurate, you can automate them to some degree. This is how the Chicago Tribune does its Crime in Chicagoland website, which provides community by community context to crime reports. So you have a little bit more nuance than there was a shooting here, or there was a hit and run here, or there was a drive-by. And it's also how we at OI were able to use food inspection data to provide more geographic context for inspections of restaurants, hotels, convenience stores, and other places that serve food. And that's my presentation.
Any
Yeah.
tips on just discovery? Say, I have a particular project and I want to find out if what I'm looking for has already been created or if they exist. Any ideas on where I might start?
I would in software development, it's called a user story, and so I would try to put yourself in this particular project. Let's say, for example, I'm going to be on trial, right? And there's going to be a jury, right? Well, there's got to be a process or a mechanism for selecting or deselecting the members of that jury, right? And so my next step would be, where is that process? Where is the explanation of how that process has to occur, right? To ensure that it's done appropriately or inappropriately, but that way you can get a better sense of what records might happen, right? If we walk out of here and go buy a coffee at Starbucks, there's a record of that transaction, right? There's a credit card record, there's a paper receipt. So try to sort of map out all of the instances where there might be a transaction, and that may help you determine where the records might be. And then you can try to understand, you can try to extrapolate what agencies might have that information.
There's just a follow-up on that. There's a really great website called openData.stackexchange.com. And if you're and it basically is a website for people who are real kind of enthusiasts or part of the open data movement. And amongst themselves, they have enormous amount of kind of institutional knowledge about where the bodies are buried. So I would just, that can be a quick resource there. And then I think also it's a very good, in Chicago we have a more kind of localized resource, which is the Open Government Hack Night.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking for something that has to do with some sort of data in Chicago, then it's likely that someone in that community has at least thought about something that's relevant to that there.
Or
So
know
those
somebody
happen
else.
every Tuesday at 1871.
Another source for knowing what kinds of data might be created in a given project, for example, is if there's a contract that's created with the government body, get a copy of the contract, and you can tell by the contract if there's any records that need to be created pursuant to that agreement, and to know that if the government body is contracting with an outside agency, that you can get those records that are done, because those are evidence of public business, even though it's done through a contract with an outside entity.
A really easy place to start is next time you use Google, click on the settings and set it to display 20 and not 10.
Yeah, now you got twice the information. That's
You have to turn off the type ahead, make a guess, and then you'll get 20 results and not 10, and you'll see stuff that most people don't even look at.
Interesting. Cool.
Is this stuff that would be on the second page?
Okay. So, I'm going to talk about scraping for a second, and before that I want to just give a little bit of a background on how most of the web works. So we've been talking about data today, and particularly, we're talking about most of the data that we're going to be working with to some extent is data that's in a spreadsheet, data that's in some sort of table, like this. This is when this loads up, it'll look like a spreadsheet that you've seen thousands of times. The thing is that like what many of us don't really realize is that like almost every single website is basically a fancy view of a spreadsheet that exists on some other computer. Okay? So this is a spreadsheet of census tracts. These are the identifiers of the census tracts, and these are tiers. Tiers are part of a complicated way that Chicago Public Schools does allocates seats in selective enrollment in the selective enrollment high schools and magnet schools. It's a long story, but it's like actually a very important component of a policy that is in some ways keeping some of Chicago's schools somewhat racially integrated. So there's this data here, and this data is getting fuzzed up here. This data is the same data that's powering this application that I helped make with my business partner and some other folks here in Chicago. This is just a site that makes it super easy for people to look up which tier they're in, which can be a useful piece of information if you're going about applying for high school. We click on one of these things here, like we get all this information here. All this information is just being pulled like out of that spreadsheet that I just showed you. This is just a fancy view of that spreadsheet. Almost every website that you guys use is working the exact same way. Facebook has a bunch of spreadsheets that has the list of all the little messages that people gave you, the time that they made that message, the responses that message is to, a date stamp and things like that. It's just spreadsheets all the way down. So what that means is that sometimes there's an opportunity of going the other way, of going from websites back to spreadsheets, right? And that's what scraping is. That's all that means. It just means you're going to look at a bunch of pages on a website, and you're going to turn that back into the spreadsheet that is originally generating that website in the first place. It's like a really, really inefficient way of copying a spreadsheet from one computer to another, right? But that's basically what we're doing, okay? All right, so how do you do it? So here's something that we did just recently. We have in Illinois, the Illinois State Board of Elections, and these guys are actually really great in responding to public records requests. If you actually just need a bunch of data from them, just ask, and they're very responsive, and they'll usually send you a CD right away. We want to do a project with Dave Melton over there, where we wanted to make this information about campaign finance available on a closer to near real-time basis. So it doesn't really work to ask them to send us a CD every week of something that's new. So for us, so we're going to automate the extraction of information in their databases into a set of spreadsheets, and we're going to use scraping to do that. So in particular, we're going to go to like a campaign committee page. And here's what I want to kind of show you, right? I'm going to point out a couple things. First, it's a little bit hard to see, but we have this URL, and it says campaign disclosure, and it says committee details, ASPX ID 4410. Pretty just like basically blah 4410, okay? And then we have an information that's in a table. At the top of the table, we have the name of the committee. Right below that, we have some purpose. Then right below that, in this format, we have the name of the contact person. We have whether it's active or not, it's a status. We have these kind of two IDs which are not really all that relevant, and we know what type of committee it is, and we know when it was created. Okay, that's on this page. That's for 4410. Okay. This is 4411. We have the name of the committee, right? You getting this? We have the purpose, we have the contact person, we have the same committee stuff, we have the data is created, the type of committee, in this case, it's no. It's gonna be the same thing for 412, it's gonna be the same thing for 41113, right? So this is like, this is because there's a database, there's a spreadsheet that this application is using that's just pulling up the information and putting it in the same place on the website every single time, right? So we can use that fact that it's going to be in the same place every single time to say, to write a program that says, let's look in that place every single time and pull out that information and stuff it into our own spreadsheet, right? And so we can do that again with these things too. These are the financial reports. They're just other tables that are generated in the exact same way, right? They're all just fancy views of spreadsheets. So you write a program to do that, and then you get, and then we turn them back into spreadsheets. So you can now download all the campaign finance information for all local elections. This is not federal elections. This is state, local, statewide elections for Illinois. Some statewide elections. And here are all the candidates. These are all spreadsheets. Here, let's go down here. Right. Let's go down to one. All right, here are, let's see how fast this internet connection is. Pretty slow. Well, let's go in the background. Basically, this is another spreadsheet. So we visited thousands of web pages. Not us personally, right? Like we went home and slept for a couple days, and then every Friday this thing gets updated, and we don't have to do anything more, right? And so and at the end of the day, we get spreadsheets back out of it. Spreadsheets that will get updated every Friday, and we'll always have the current information.
I think I blinked. This sheet is not public. You created this. You scraped
It's public for you, right? So, but this is the same data. This is the exact same data that's accessible
Got it. Okay.
through this kind of clunky interface, not in
That
bulk,
we saw on the other sheet.
from the Illinois State Board of Election.
Okay.
Right? We just turned it back into spreadsheets for you. All right, so let's take a look at it, right?
So theoretically, if you did a Freedom of Information Act request to the State Board of Elections for the underlying spreadsheet,
They would give
your
it to
two
you.
spreadsheets should look alike.
They should look alike. They're going to be there might be different formatted differently, but like within each column, they should be the same. If there's not, there's a problem with our process or with their data. But they should be the same. And if you ask them, they will give you one. They won't give you, it'll be hard for them to give you one every Friday. That's all right. So here we have committee IDs, committee numbers. These are basically these are the financial health right here of here's how much they've received in this quarter, and this is for every single committee in 2014, right? So we're doing pretty good here. Okay, now, and then other people can now use this and do it. People have already used this in reporting. I know that some other folks are working on using this. It's a lot easier to use this data to do your projects than it is to scrape it yourself. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about why you might want to scrape, right? So you might want to scrape when the data is actually available through a website, but you're getting denied through FOIA or you're getting stolen through FOIA, which happens sometimes, although it's very silly. And it's cheaper for you to do this than to hire a lawyer, right? Then it's that might be the way you do it. The other way to do it, which is kind of more compelling, is if you want the data on an ongoing, timely basis. So this is why every blog did a lot of scraping. This is why lots of journalists, news apps do scraping. It's because they want to have something that's kind of ongoing and live. If what you're really is working with is a kind of big chunk of data that you want to use once, then FOIA is almost always the right way to go. Here's the reason why you might not want to scrape, even if you wanted to, is that sometimes it's illegal. So websites have things called terms of services, which are kind of implicit contracts that you sign just by using the website, whether you know that you agreed to do it or not. There is, I think, some murkiness about the murkiness about governmental websites prohibiting scraping. But you should be a lawyer before you tread into those waters. And I personally never scrape anything that says that has a terms of service that says that I can't scrape.
Is there a usually easy place to find those terms?
Usually they'll be in the footer of a website. There'll be a little text that says terms of service. Also, the other reason is that it's expensive. I think it can be expensive. Certainly for a complicated site like the Illinois State Board of Elections, that's going to cost you $3,000 to $5,000, either in-house or to hire someone to scrape a site that's complicated like that. So
It's cheaper than a lawyer.
Wait, so you're saying that there's government sites that prohibit scraping?
yes.
That's not right.
Yeah, so in Illinois, the most famous one is that it's illegal to scrape corporations from the
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State. There's a state law that prohibits it.
A lot of the records on the businesses that are registered with the Secretary of State's office are in Springfield on paper. So when you go to the actual Secretary of State's office, it's only about 30% of the information, like not the principles, not the fun stuff that's in the Articles of Incorporation. It's usually just the registered agent, the address, the name, the date. But yeah.
Yeah, and in addition, the Cook County clerk's office has all of the court data online. There is actually not a terms of service that prohibits the scraping, but the site is managed by LexisNexis, and they are very aggressive in taking countermeasures to prohibit, to make it practically impossible to scrape. So that happens sometimes too. Also, for example, another example of a terms of service that prohibits this is the Cook County Recorders of Deeds website has a terms of service that says it's illegal to scrape that site. So it's quite. We should talk. I think this is very dubious.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna ask the same question twice. So for these 4 sites, there's a scraper that exists.
Right.
We're not gonna get over and find it. Is there a way to find out or discover scrapers that may exist for sites that I'm interested in?
So there's a site called Scraper Wiki that's good to check out, and it's it probably won't have the one that's exactly for the site that you want, but it may have something that's similar for what you're looking at. But I think that's actually a pretty good segue to Scott, to talk about how, because a site like the Illinois State Board of Elections, you're going to need to either be a pretty experienced programmer or hire a programmer. That's really, it's not something that. It's something that requires a good deal of technical ability to do. But there are but many websites are actually much simpler, and you can actually go a long way using simpler tools.
I think you said it too well. I feel like I don't have anything to add. I feel like Force is the Apple Watch, and I'm U2. I'm going on afterwards. People aren't really care. They're turning off the stream at this point. I also didn't realize that you can scrape all these websites, which kills my intro, which was if it's on the internet, it's available to you, take it. So that's probably not true, but I've behaved that way for most of my web development career. I'll be a little bit more careful about when I'm setting my examples now, I think. But I generally believe that, right? There's, if there's, a legal versus ethical, question here about getting certain data and what you plan to do with it in certain cases. But I believe that if it's on the internet and it's being made available and your eyeballs can look at it, and you're using it to do something positive, that you can take it. And, and I think the means of taking it, vary. And it's easy to think that what we do as scraping requires some technical ability, and I don't think that's true at all, right? There's a spectrum of convenience versus necessity, and much of what we can take from websites involves copying and pasting or typing. We don't think of these things as tools, but they're tools. They're tools at our disposal, and we can use them to get information from one format into another, but it's not always convenient to do it that way, right? if you're looking at one particular page and you need the information off that page, copying and pasting, or searching and replacing can do wonders. And I use it all the time. And it's easy to think, well, I'm going to create this program that's going to go through this page and do that. But the setup time is a half hour for what would take 10 minutes of copying and pasting or searching and replacing. And it's important not to forget that. But when you were using like Forrest's example, when it's a web page that links to other web pages, and the sum of all these pages is 1,000 pages, copying and pasting is no longer practical. We start moving up into the necessity side of the spectrum. And writing a program or using something from ScraperWiki becomes a way to save time. Now, my experience has been sort of broken into two phases, right? Before the Chicago's data portal and after the portal. Before the data portal, most things were a necessity. Things weren't available. You needed to make more, FOIA requests, or you had to do these brute force scraping to get information you need. Now, much of the data that we were looking for back then is available on the data portal, and if it's not, my experience is that the people in the city have been very friendly about putting it on the portal. They didn't know there was a need, so they went out and put it there. Quick case in point example was I created a site that helps notify you when street sweeping is about to occur. Before that information, which is now on the data portal, before it was on the data portal, it involved looking up searching for your ward and your parking area in two distinct PDFs, comparing one to the other, and then finding, there it is. Finding, what, bless you, finding what was available to you. And it was a very complicated process. And to scrape that data out and to create a site like this would have taken, they were all in PDFs, it would have taken forever. But the city, this was when Brett Goldstein was the CDO, said, well, we didn't realize that was an important data piece. We're looking to get more things on the portal. It exists, and it exists in electronic format. It's just a matter of wrangling it all, putting it together, making it, a coherent bit of data, and now that's up there, and, making a site like this is more or less trivial because the data side of it's been done for you. So the one thing I want to impart here is that scraping does not require any amount of technical expertise. That scraping is just amount, like Forrest said, of getting data from one form back into another, and everybody has a tool set to get from one point to another. It's just a matter of using the tools you have available to you.
I would just kind of follow up on this a little bit. So one thing that's different about Scott's story than I think the experience of Miriam and Fernando is that he was able to go to a government body and say, like, I'm going to make this thing that's going to make you guys look good, right? He was really like he was able to. It was an ability to have a kind of partnership that says like where the public body was really able to see like why this would look good for them. And that's like clearly not a proper role for the press, or oftentimes some of the work that you do is that you need to have more of an arm's length relationship with the public bodies that you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. But that's not true. That's really not true of lots of nonprofits. Right? Many nonprofits we work hand in glove with certain public agencies, and if you can go to a public agency and say like, hey, if we like make this thing available, you're gonna get like a quick report out of it. We're gonna be doing this work for you. That's really gonna let you understand what's going on. We're gonna expand the number of people who are gonna know about your existence and about why you have an important function. Then that's something that can actually be a very powerful play.
Here's an example of where I think the kinds of scraping tools that they're talking about don't work. And I know we've talked about these, the determination letters that come out of the public access counselor's office at the AG's office. So the public access counselor interprets the Freedom of Information Act, or interprets how it applies to certain circumstances where people ask to get their FOIA denial reviewed. And since the public access counselor received binding enforcement power in 2010, they've gotten like over 10,000 inquiries. So in less than 5 years, they've got like 12,000 inquiries. And a lot of those inquiries, only like 50 binding opinions have come out since 2010. So the vast majority of those opinions, most of them bearing on the Freedom of Information Act and not on the Open Meetings Act, those are not binding opinions made publicly available on the Public Access Counselor's website, but are documents named determination letters that are sitting at their office in PDF documents all over their, computers. Well, we have an arrangement with I wouldn't say like they're moving heavens to get every single determination letter to us because they're really busy, but we have an informal arrangement with them where they are actually giving us every single determination letter after they redact them, so that in the project that we're doing for the Chicago Headline Club, we can scrape the data from each of those letters to see what are the patterns for the arguments that are being made by these public bodies to deny, and what's the outcome. It's not so easy to use like a piece of software to get that data. We need lawyers.
Yeah.
Volunteer lawyers to read every single one of those letters and to extract the information. So again, we talked a little bit about like what is the easy data that governments make available, and oftentimes it's the low-hanging fruit, or it's that stuff that's not that controversial. Other times it's the matter of the government body doesn't know what people are interested in, and they just didn't fathom that people care about the street sweeper's schedule. Other times it's that they don't have the capacity, like the AG's office, they're swamped. They don't have the capacity to put every single determination letter online. And unless you know what you're looking for in the letter, you can't ask for every single determination letter. Someone tried to do that, and they were turned down, and a judge in the court agreed with them that would be unduly burdensome on the public access counselor to give up every single one of those letters in the time frame that's set forth in the FOIA. So just to know that there are data sets that aren't made public for whatever reasons, and that asking questions of the government body to find out do they exist, and then utilizing the Freedom of Information Act to get at that data.
I would just add to that too. Every year there are new exemptions to the Freedom of Information Act request that don't actually make it into the act itself. And I know you've done work on identifying exemptions that are inked into other statutes that actually reflect back on the FOIA statute. When I was at the Reporter working with Rui, we were doing reporting on the Illinois Department of Corrections. And every year the Illinois Department of Corrections compiles a report on gang presence inside of IDOC facilities. That is exempt.
Right.
That is exempt.
So those are external statutes to the FOIA that are making certain records exempt from FOIA.
Right.
And I know the legislature tries to stick in the name of that act instead of the Freedom of Information Act, so that at least you have an indication like, oh, look, there's an act that has some kind of restriction on records I can get. But I don't believe that's a comprehensive list.
Yeah.
Another important restriction in the FOIA law, another one that's also legally dubious, particularly given some recent developments in California, is that GIS information systems, that's the phrase in the FOIA law, are exempt. So that's why it's taken quite a long time to get, and it's beginning to change because of the leadership in the county. That's why it's taken so long to start to get basically the parcel data about Cook County property. That's only beginning to come out now, and it's because it's been exempt from FOIA, and it still is exempt from FOIA. It's really the act of the executive that we have, the executive of many different agencies that we have at the county level that are beginning to change their mind about that, but only because they, as individual elected officials, are deciding it. It's not covered under FOIA.
So in other words, it's volitional. So in other words, the county has decided
Yes.
that it's, why not?
Yes, that's right. And so, like, there's a recent case in California where a California state judge decided that a record is a record is a record. It's sort of like, seems like there's a clear kind of parallel here, but there's not been any. But no one has made that challenge in Illinois.
Yeah, and to keep in mind, the California statute's a different statute.
Completely different statute.
So I haven't heard about this issue in Illinois. I'm shocked to hear that might be the case, that these GIS
Yeah, no.
systems might be, but I don't know if that's the case in Illinois. That's something we'd have to take a look into.
We should chat.
We should talk. I know.
Yeah. If the information that you want is spread across hundreds or thousands of pages, it can be really challenging.
Yeah.
But at the other end of the scale, if it's 2 or 5 or 10 pages, you can just copy and paste. I mean, the campaign committees, you know, you can just sweep across, select everything in the box, copy, go to Notepad and paste, and there you go. And if there's a half a dozen of them,
Yeah.
That's fine. Also, for things that are more or less tabular on the page, save as text, and you've got the whole page. You may need a little bit of tweaking, but again, if you're talking some modest, manageable number of pages, it's a lot less falderall than all this stuff. Just save as text, and you've got everything on the page.
Yeah.
Yeah, one other thing, you're describing the problem of many records. The other thing to keep in mind is that most records are transactional. They are records of transactions between an individual and an agency, or an agency and an agency. And so oftentimes if you do get into trouble requesting from one government agency, understanding the relationships with other government agencies can help you sort of get around it. That was used in the case of Ferguson. And now the awareness that has come to light around military weapons being distributed among local police departments, you know,
Yeah.
and so that's federal data that then gets down into the local level, and you can track the guns and the tanks and everything else, but because you're going through the feds rather than going through the local police department.
Right. Oftentimes, the best way to learn about Chicago Public Schools, which is infamously unresponsive to FOIA, is to try to get records from the Illinois State Board of Elections.
Of education.
Of Education,
Yeah.
sorry. You,
Bisbee.
Yeah, so I have a couple questions on that. The point that Miriam brought up about a request being burdensome. If it's burdensome, that's, I guess, an exemption. That could be denied for that. But if what you're saying is, what might be burdensome from one side of that transaction, from one organization, might not be the same burden from another organization.
Correct.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a clear definition of unduly burdensome. We know that 9,200 documents is considered unduly burdensome, because there was a court case in which that was found to be the case, that the agency couldn't possibly copy 9,200 documents and like keep their business running in a efficient manner. And unduly burdensome, the important thing to remember about that tool that government bodies have in Illinois to deny a request, that's not a blanket denial. They have to work with the requester to narrow the request. So if someone asks for categorical documents like they did in the case of the determination letters at the PAC, where they wrote a letter to the PAC and they said, hey, I want every single determination letter you've written since 2010. That was considered a categorical request. Well, can you narrow that down a little bit, like maybe a time frame, or maybe you only want those Freedom of Information Act requests for reviews that bear on the exception 7(1)K? Or maybe you only, like, what is it that you're really looking for? And like drilling down, sometimes it takes a conversation between the requester and someone from the department at the public body where the records are being asked, or the FOIA officer of that public body, to kind of figure out what is it being had. Remember, this is not supposed to be the FOIA is not, it shouldn't be controversial. Like, you shouldn't be embarrassed or ashamed to use FOIA. You know, it's like it's a tool that we have to be civic participants and to inform ourselves about our government behavior, their actions, their activities, and it's not supposed to be something that you should feel ashamed about using. So to have a natural conversation with someone at a government body to kind of figure out what it is you're looking for, what is the best format, what record is going to have the information that like will get at what you're looking for, that the closest possible answer to your question.
Are there limits to, say, another dimension, maybe the frequency? Can I ask for election board data updates every day?
Well, see, so that's where that one bill that I mentioned earlier, House Bill 3796. Andrea's my colleague. 3796 that was vetoed by the governor this summer. They wanted to create the General Assembly wanted to create a category of requests called voluminous requests. So if a person who asked, under this definition, asked for, what was it?
It was like megabytes. It didn't.
Oh, yes. If you asked for 5 documents in a certain period amount of time, like a week's time, and it was like 80 megabytes. I mean, it was a ridiculous. The language is like not workable at all. And the idea was that the government bodies wanted to recoup monies for electronic requests that they had electronic documents as the responses. They wanted to get some money from that, even though, because under the current FOIA, really all they could get was nothing unless they gave you like a disk. So they were attaching dollar amounts to the number of megabytes or kilobytes of information that you'd receive, and it was completely arbitrary and not based on any kind of logic. And once you have that voluminous request attached to your request, basically you would not get the information in a timely fashion, and this was like death to our clients who monitor their governments. I mean, they depend on these FOIA requests to get at the data that the governments are not routinely putting up online. Like Chicago's a great example of being really forward about putting the data sets online, although I haven't looked at it too closely. My question would be, what are they not revealing? But,
Dave Kidwell has a great screed on this. Dave Kidwell's was the guy who's been trying to get the meeting agendas for Rahm Emanuel since he came into office, and
they're suing.
Yeah, and they've been suing him for a long time for that.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I would just emphasize too, like, have a conversation. You know, I mean, the reason why forests hack of the state's own data, which spent money on that software, looks better is because they care, right? And oftentimes the reason why you get documents in crappy PDFs is because the software sucks. They were sold bad stuff, right? And so if you're going to ask a question like that, it helps to have that conversation to understand how their systems are configured and set up to tell you, yeah, this is reasonable. You can totally expect that. In fact, you can sign up for alerts from our website because we do that, as opposed to, no, it would be unduly burdensome because I would have to every Friday sit down and export the entire database.
You know, and so LinkedIn and also the fact that because of FOIA and other laws, it's very easy to find out who works for the government is a great tool for this. It's like a really good idea to try to figure out in the agency that you care about, like who works there as an analyst, who works there as a data person, and it's like, and chat with them, you know? I mean, like, and I'll tell you what, like, almost no one else that they talk to in a day cares about their job, right? I mean, and so you're like, oh, like this thing that you care about so much, I also care a lot about, you know? That person is not it's like probably not the person that person is not the person who can give you the data almost ever, but it is a person that can like help you understand what kind of data they have, what format it is in, like, and how to go about like making a good request.
There's the Chicago Headline Club 2 years ago set up a website called FOIAIllinois.org. It is still the most comprehensive list of FOIA officers in the state. We're trying to keep it updated. We're actually looking at maybe making it a wiki because folks leave, jobs change. But FOIAIllinois.org is a place where you could find the kind of folks that Forrest just mentioned. Yep.
Sorry, the URL you just said?
FOIA, F-O-I-A, Illinois.org.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Scott said that web scrapping is not something like a state of the art or very hard to do. Could you give us some examples of tools that we could use, or like homemade that we could use for some scrapping that is not just 6 pages? It's something a little more difficult, but we don't need to hire engineer to code something or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the very basic ones are copying and pasting, and then what I do a lot of the time when it's just a few pages is I look at the source code of a website, because what may not look to be structured.
You do that by right-clicking on a website.
Yeah.
And you see this thing called view page source. Every browser, this happens to be Chrome, but every browser I've seen that looks almost like that. And then this is the source.
Yeah, and what you start seeing here, I mean, this is maybe the very same, but you start seeing patterns of things. Maybe you scroll down a little bit. No, this isn't a very good great example. But on a lot of websites, you'll start seeing patterns, right? When there's a table that gets rendered up on a website, there you go. That's a good example right there. So you start seeing patterns, where on the website you might not see a distinct pattern, and here you start seeing these TDs, right, and some TRs and stuff like that. And you can copy and paste this out to, a text editor and search and replace and get rid of all the TDs and get rid of all the TRs, and all of a sudden now you've got a page that's got, data straight top to bottom. And then you can start going and saying, all right, well, let me actually search and replace a carriage return on one line and turn that into a comma. And next thing you know, your page pops from being top down into something that Excel can read. And it's like that. It's pretty low tech. You can just use search and replace on a text editor.
It can be tedious, however.
It's
Be careful.
right.
There's also
Don't do
some,
this lightly.
you can use Google Docs
Yeah.
to insert some basic scraping where it would pull that same information and throw it into a spreadsheet in Google, which there are several tutorials of search scraping with Google Docs, and
Yeah.
you should find them.
It has an XPath function, I believe,
Mhm.
that can go to XML and get some info.
Yeah.
Which is something I think Excel doesn't do.
Well, the tutorials are all online, but I would suggest taking.
Yeah, there are free online sites that will. By the way, I still say this. I say online site. They're all just online, aren't they? It's like going into a Thai place and ordering a Thai iced coffee. It's just an iced coffee. But it's like taking a PDF and turning it into text for you. It's not something you have to figure out to do. You can just type in PDF, convert, and there'd be a free tool, and you just upload the document, and then they give you the text. A lot of that stuff is freely available. When you start getting into, and there's no magic number, but if the site has 100 pages and you're trying to figure out how to bounce from one page to the next and get subpages, a scraper in that case is tends to be a little bit easier to do that stuff. But like I said, it's convenience. If you don't mind the TDM of going through page by page, and you have a week, you could do it. I mean, you'll strain your eyes and whatnot, but Forrest is
If you
doing
want to
it.
automate this, it sounds like there's nothing simple out there. You
Yeah.
need to find a coder.
Every page is different.
Yeah.
Every site is different, so.
There's bunches of people who are trying to build generic solutions, and they're all crap, and you'll just don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, because they'll cover. You'll think you'll save time. They'll cover 80% of the cases, and you'll think you'll save time, and then you'll spend just as much time on the last 20%.
But I would say go to the OpenGov Hack Night and say,
Yeah.
this is the data I would like to have. Can anybody here help me scrape this? And there you go. Yeah, find someone. Way in the back. Yeah.
Sort of in the spirit of the school data here. So for us in the audience, when we were going about our work, and we might hit a dead end finding some data, and then we either use somebody's scraper or pull it down manually. What would be the best way for us to share that with the community? Is there a good, maybe it's the Hack Night, or is there a good central repository or something that would be best to talk about the data we found?
Is there a listserv?
Yeah, so WBZ's got uses WBZ uses a really cool. So there's Socrata has basically a kind of Socrata like a public benefit version, and WBZ actually shares a lot of the data that they FOIA on there. So they did this great thing of looking at police contact cards, which is basically when a police officer has any contact with anyone on the street, up to and including. I don't know if they have a contact card when they have an arrest, but if it doesn't have an arrest, then they're supposed to fill out a contact card, which is and so ACLU and WBZ we're able to make a very tightly, very precisely targeted FOIA requesting got records out from the police, which is pretty impressive. And then, but they, the WBZ turned around and shared that data and other interesting stuff that they have on this site. Let's see if I can find it. It's a good place.
I would say, to Scott's point, the OpenGov Hack Night.
Yeah.
If you've got a problem, or you've hit a stumbling block, or you have a data set that you really want to get, it's a tremendous community. They're always there, 6 to whenever, 12th floor of Merchandise Mart in 1871.
And if you have a
On
theme
Tuesdays.
of things that you like to put up there, start a blog on Tumblr and just post it on there. The beauty is, anytime you get some data or some information and you put it on any site that's accessible to you to publish, it gets indexed by Google, and somebody will search the right term and find it, as long as it's available.
Yeah, this is a site that I was thinking about. WBC shares a lot of their data that they put on this site. So they got lots of cool stuff here. I think I've seen some other people use it too. Not a lot of people are using it, but like it's but this site's going to be around for, Socrates going to be around for at least a while, So.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Question for Marianne. Yesterday I talked to this guy from Louisville, Kentucky, who's he's a civic hacker, a very active one, trying to take the idea of every block and replicate it down there. But he is getting at some stumbling block with this particular county agency that deals with property information. And he sent FOIA, basically they said, okay, we're gonna charge you $13,000 for that data. And he was like, there's no way I can pay for that. So he appealed that info and he still got denial based on reason was basically A, he's not a journalist, and B, he on the site, just like everybody, you guys probably know, a whole bunch of different links to other commercial agencies, and by having that particular link, you are also viewed as a commercial property, and therefore you are doing this for profit, therefore we're going to charge you. Have you come across something like that that kind of stings really?
Well, first of all, so you say that was in Kentucky?
Yeah.
So Kentucky's going to have their own statute for their public record request law, and I don't know what that statute is, so I couldn't speak to any of their provisions. In general, like in Illinois, commercial, so we talked about how the FOIA is intent neutral. That was kind of a lie, because if you have a commercial purpose for receiving that FOIA, like in other words, you plan on making money or soliciting for business, then you have to divulge that that's your intent. So you don't have to say what your business is, but just that you're using it for a commercial purpose. And in that case, the timeline in the Illinois FOIA doesn't apply, and you can't utilize a request for review process. But I do believe that the costs in Illinois remains the same, where the first 50 pages are free, and thereafter it's 15 cents per page. I couldn't tell you what it is in Kentucky.
Is it, if you're not a journalistic agency or doing it for public good?
Yeah.
When the cost incurs after 50 pages?
No, so in the so another example, so FOIA's like any statute, there's lots of variables in place. So another intent reason why you might want to tell the government body in Illinois what you're going to do with the record, generally speaking, is because you can get a waiver of those fees. So if you say, I'm getting this information in the public interest, like I'm going to publish this information, the government body may, if they want to, waive any fees that are attached to the FOIA request. One way to prevent getting charged $13,000 or getting all the copies made, and then you get this bill saying come pick up your copies and it's going to cost you $600, is in the FOIA request to say, if the response to this request is going to exceed $5, please contact me first. Or if there's any fee incurred, please contact me first. So that way the public body's on notice that you're not necessarily interested in, handing your pocketbook over. I hope that answers your question.
Can I add something to that? So with House Bill 3796, which we've referenced, the FOIA in Illinois, as Miriam has said several couple times is intent neutral, but they keep trying to change that because public bodies a lot of times are frustrated with the amount of documents, or there's personal vendettas and the little things that happen, especially at local government level. So this law that they tried to pass this past session allowed nonprofits to be exempt from the recurrent requester status.
The
not
luminous
recurrent,
request,
The
yeah.
luminous requester status, which was 5 in 10 days, 15 and 30, and I just checked it, and it was something else. So when it did that, we were worried, as many other nonprofits were worried, that people would just come to us. Because we could keep submitting requests and wouldn't be under this statute. So that's something else always to consider with the FOIA law, and with the person requesting, there might be exceptions or details like that within a FOIA statute.
Yeah, and in Illinois, I mean, if you're a member of the media versus if you're a citizen, like not a like an official member of the media, you should both be treated similarly under the FOIA request. It used to be that media members could have standing FOIA requests, like, will you please send me the agenda to your meetings every week? I'm not really sure how public bodies fare with that these days. Like, they, you know, I don't know if they honor standing requests, but
If you're grandfathered in,
if you're grandfathered in.
because like now a lot of it is just email, or they just, it's sufficient to post it on their website and tell you to just come get it there.
Yeah.
You know,
Bless
that,
you.
like, that's, I mean, there should not be a difference, but there is a difference. You know, I
Yeah,
mean-
oftentimes when there's restriction, whenever these laws, so after the reform of 2010, the General Assembly has tried to roll back the legislation like every session, and we've been fighting that every session, and what was I gonna say? Oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. What were you saying?
Well, I was just saying that, like, you know, one thing that news organizations can do, or if
Oh,
you
right.
have an audience, then like one thing that you can do is you can write interesting stories about how your very reasonable FOIA
Right.
request is not.
That's a good story, that
yeah.
the public body's denying your request, that embarrasses them. But what I was going to say was when they do these rollback legislations, they often will include a provision that like the media is exempt, nonprofit organizations are exempt, and academic organizations are exempt. And they think that like, wow, we've really done a good job here because all these organizations that need the information are exempt, but they forget like, everyone needs the information. Lots of people want access to the information. They shouldn't be treating the so-called media members and
Yeah,
nonprofit members differently from everybody else. We should all be treated the same.
These are public records.
They're public records, exactly.
I was just gonna ask, why do you think that it's so difficult and it's such a hard thing to get the information? Why do they make it so difficult?
Well, again, so for the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that no one's embarrassed about revealing, that's fine. When there's some wrongdoing, if there's wrongdoing, if there's someone who made a mistake and they're embarrassed about it, those are two reasons to not release information. Sometimes, in our experience, it's just a matter of control. Like they don't like the person who's asking for the data, and so they just don't want to give it to that person. But if so and so asked for it, they'd give it up. I mean, it's not rational. But that doesn't mean it doesn't. Just because it's irrational doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and that those people are in a situation where they actually have to fight this battle to get information.
Or they do the opposite, where they give you everything, and it's a huge data dump of like tens of thousands of pages in this PDF file, and you can't find anything, which I think you've talked about.
Yeah.
Fernando,
Yeah.
That happens, and you're like, that's not helpful.
You just give up.
I mean, from the other side, like these, like all these public agencies, they get tons and tons and tons of FOIA requests, and lots of them are from complete wingnuts. Like, I mean, they're like, you know, they're about like requests for all the information you have about UFOs, or information for all the information that you have regarding. And the thing is, like, oftentimes they're not even like they're not your constituents. There's like lots of organizations that are interested in UFOs, and they send them to all elected officials and public bodies, you know. And so, I mean, there's like, you know, and particularly if you're a large organization, it really can. I mean, it really can. It's like it is easy. It's very easy for them to ignore requests from individuals because, in part, because they don't have any clout, and also because 90% of the requests they get from individuals are really pretty nuts.
But it depends on the agency. I mean, I was reading just the other day about an agency that, or it was a presentation where, like, two years ago, they had, it was this morning, 1,800 requests. It was the Department of Public Health. And then they put the information about restaurants, like how restaurants fare and their grading system and online. And in 2012 or 2014, they only had one FOIA request on that matter.
Look, where was that?
The Department, Cook County Department of Health, or maybe it was Chicago Department of Health. One of the, it was the morning presentation. I'll look at it. So, you know, putting information online is one way for government bodies to subvert FOIA requests, but one of the issues is, what if you want to inspect the original? Just because they put the information online doesn't take away your right under FOIA to inspect the original document. So one of the bad things about House Bill 3796 is it stated that if the information was online, then that your FOIA request is fulfilled. And for some people who don't have access to the internet, because not everyone does, in Illinois, I think at least 20% of people don't have like access to streaming, like a high fast internet, basically. Like they've got dial-up, or you know they can't get these like really complicated websites. And then also there's the issue of wanting to see the original, which you're entitled to do.
How are we doing on time?
We're done.
We're done. We're done. All right, thanks, guys.
We're over the time. Oh, I want to give you my card.
Yeah.
So about the illegal scraping.
Yeah, let's talk.
I want to talk to you about that.
All right. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that, man. It's just
because that's not right.
Like, yeah, it's not right.
That's really not right.
Yeah.
And there was a really good article in the American Bar Association, the Bar Association Journal, about how LexisNexis and even government bodies like Fortress are saying that these opinions are proprietary
Right, like
opinions.
Pacer.
And it's like, no, this is a government document, it's opinions. But LexisNexis and Westlaw, all of their annotations, that's proprietary.
Yeah.
That's how they get around it.
That's how they get around it. Yeah.
They make it so that you can't divorce any of their annotations from the text.
Yeah, let's talk.
More about the project
Sure. We're collecting information, all of the information on Freedom of Information Act, Open Meetings Act, and we're analyzing them all for all the variables. We started in 2013, just last year we started. And I mean, so far we've documented about 171 discrimination letters. I mean, we've just scraped the surface.
What's the goal? How many do you like to do?
Well, I mean, the goal, ideally we would do all of them, but I mean, we started working with data from 2013 backwards, so there's a bunch of, so the idea is if we can get as many of them online or available to the public, it's just that much more information that people are equipped with to understand what documents are available, how might this agency respond to your request, what arguments have been successful.
Oh yeah, don't worry. I'm in deep in the geeky stuff.
It's going to be in the spreadsheet. So it's going to have a lot of variables in it. And Chicago Headline Club is interested in putting it upline, not just for their media journalists, members, but for everybody. We haven't done it yet.
When do you know? I guess I can ask him.
Yeah, the timeline is not really set in stone. It's like when we do it. I'm working with Fernando, the new president of the Chicago Headline Club. Your name is Ruth? Oh, okay.
We did.
Oh, okay.
Cover
It's just the opposite of a new website.
Okay, awesome.
not every time, but freedom, access to information, all of that stuff.
Oh, well, I don't have another card with me, but I wonder if Andrea does.
I can find it.
Yeah. So feel free. So we're a resource for everyone: journalists, public officials, educators, students, youth, everybody. So when you have questions about the Freedom of Information Act, Open Meetings Act, give us a call.
He runs basically the Illinois campaign.
So you're no longer the
finding
president?
what,
Who's the new president?
Mary Wisniewski. She works at Reuters.
Trying to keep
Stan is still on FOIA.
honesty. I mean, like,
Right.
look at him slowing to the
Right.
honesty, you know?
Oh, I didn't know that.
And,
If you play,
Rose
like,
is,
if you
Rose
sing,
is like,
you're welcome
she's
to come
got a
to the-
pretty,
No one wants to hear
pretty
that.
long, extensive background, like she's
A
really
cat, maybe.
breaking into
It's
the,
a fun way to
the
go.
trying to find out how
Okay.
technology.
Well,
can
Stan is
at
still
all
VP of
make
FOIA,
political
and I was just
unclear.
mentioning to Amy.
So is there only a contact
To be
person
determined.
for this project?
Yeah.
Get the
The only
straight
contact
site,
person?
that
He's
she's
the
working
contact
on.
person.
Okay, I didn't realize.
I'm still
Making sure
involved.
she can check the
I was
eligibility
just telling you
of a wide
today.
variety of
That's
other
what
services.
I said it which is like a sub-project for the Rabbi Club. They had like 10 years worth of emails and printouts. We scanned them all into PDFs, and then we used this tool,
Oh, that's
Document
great.
Cloud.
I didn't
So
hear
we've
that.
extracted
That makes a
all
lot
of
of
the text
sense.
from
It
all
seems
those
like,
files.
I thought that
So
that
I'm gonna
would
give
be
it a
the
crack.
same.
Then what do you do, how can you, but extracting the text is one thing, but then what do you do to like sort through it? Manual.
But you're not like reading and
Retyping.
retyping. So at that point, you're just literally just copying it all and putting it in. So I'm gonna take a crack at the
You know,
250
but
determination letters that you guys.
down the road,
Well, now we've
assuming that
got
things
more than
get,
300.
things go
So
well,
if I
you
talk
want
to
to keep your eye.
take a
eye on
crack,
the
but I'm
road.
gonna talk to
Someone
our guy
might wanna
Stan
do
and
that
get
very
all
real
of it.
fast.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. And that might make it easier to, you know, at least if you're working with text already, you don't have to go through that process. And then when you're done, if you didn't go through that process.
Well, actually, don't look too close.
Yeah, we were trying to make it
About
stuff
moving it.
by creating like this web, well, Google document that you just like enter in the fields.
Yep.
I wonder if there's some way to insert those two together, the scraping and, I don't know, we'll figure it out. I wish I knew all this stuff, like, I wish I knew all the tech stuff,
Well, I don't
you
have any.
know? Like, I wish I could read that source code, like a book. It takes time, but yeah. Yeah, I'm jealous.
Hey,
Always a
thanks. That
pleasure,
was
sir.
fun.
Yep, good to see you again.
Are you gonna go to the reception at all?
Not the reception, or we at the town hall.
Okay. All right. Oh, good man.
I'm down here.
Yeah, how are things going with tonight?
I'm ready.
Very well. Yeah.
I am ready.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah, he's excited.
See you, David.
Yeah.
Doris, always a pleasure. I'll see you.
It's like
Maybe for
a
me.
different.
Yeah.
Trying to, you know, work with Nick, but also just managing developers in a new environment.
Yeah.
He's got a good guy, Lucio Villa, who's
Oh, good.
you know, he's front end, Nick's back end,
Good.
and we're having a lot of fun.
Oh, hey, that's good.
So yeah, at
That's
some
good.
point I'm hoping we'll have them come and talk.
Oh, that'd be awesome. We'd love to see that. That'd be fun for us.
So, okay, awesome. All right, see ya. Thank you.
I had an idea since we talked.
I'll tell my parents.
Yeah, they like
I think might make some sense, but I wanted to run it by you guys and see what you think. So, you've scraped the site, we've got the selection.
Yeah.
We've got this existing database, which has this program that it runs off of. But I've had some questions over the past few days about some seeming inconsistencies between what's on our website and what's on our database, what's on state board database.
Okay.
So I'm gonna have to look into that.
Okay.
But I wanna use that as a starting point to think about having maybe you guys come in, and take a look at the program that we have
Right.
sitting on this, and see if you could enhance it.
Yeah.
And use it on top of the scrape database instead.
Yeah.
Basically come up with a version 2.0
Yeah.
of our database.
Well, we've been talking about that for a
And
while.
we can put in a request for funding. You guys give me a budget and I'll put in a request for funding to the organizations.
Okay, do you let's wait until our Thursday meeting.
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Kathy.
we can discuss it.
And then, but like, let's talk about that in the context of
Yeah.
that conversation.
Absolutely.
All right, man, that sounds good.
Sounds good.
Did we ever land on a time? Thursday?
You said afternoon. I don't recall getting any more specifics.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah, that sounds good. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Our unframed needs to be just Rachel.
I'm gonna bounce upstairs.
Yeah, I was gonna say we need to.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
That was great.
Oh, thanks.
I love that.
Cool.
Mostly because, you know, there's a lot of things that I keep thinking, you can do this, right? But I can't figure out how to do it. You know, I'm not that good at programming, so.
Yeah.
Knowing where all the tricks are hidden is helpful.
Yeah.
You know, like knowing who has, you know, it's like, as an old coder, nobody ever, you're not supposed to code from scratch. Somebody did this already.
Yeah.
Where did they put it?
Yeah.
Where can I go find it?
You know, for me, I think
pie roll over here.
My company's got experience.
Oh, okay. Well, that's way better than your own. You have that running your phone.
No, because I had to.
I do. Verizon, maybe.
Do you?
Verizon.
Look.
It saved my ass a couple times.
Yeah. Yeah, this has saved my ass. Yeah.
I went to the Tribune for my interview. He had to bring up my website on his own computer. I was like, oh, you're already got my site up. I was like, oh, I guess I don't have to bring up my computer. He's like, oh, Wi-Fi is bad. I'm like, why am I not surprised? I was actually going to my mom the night before. I'm like, well, I gotta go tomorrow. Better start thinking about which projects I'm gonna talk about. And I said, I probably always have to almost definitely use the data tethering. And she was like, why? I don't have Wi-Fi. I'm like, just don't even ask. Well, after this, then we can leave, right?
Yeah. I'm kind of done with like the whole thing this weekend. So I enjoy my time. So it's just not really the same.
Put it all in one trip. I've seen it enough now. Yeah, I didn't know what it was like, you know. I read it. I tried to pine through the descriptions, try to see what's really going on. But it was kind of vague. When you see someone like Dan Sinker talking, you know, yeah, I go essentially. Dan Sinker, I think it's a professor either at Northwestern or Columbia. He ran the fake Rahm Emanuel account, all swearing and all that. It was like a fake thing, right? And no one knew who it was. It was like a big thing. And he's always like some sort of like open whatever person. But he's one of those people who's just more like, I don't know, he's just like a self-appointed guru. And I'm like, where's your code, man? What projects have you done, man? And I never really see anything from him. He just like keeps speaking.
Is it David Ryan?
Was David that bad?
No.
Oh, okay.
So the purpose of this inquiry, by the way, was that he doesn't have to go back to the COO and ask for another spend. So he wants to see, can we get this project done? Or does he start planning ahead to basically find it?
Also, you can just call Scott. Scott didn't talk about how he made people around us. It's more like a strategic. These are more like strategic sessions. Like, should we do this? And what's the best way to do it? What library do we use? Which software developers do we hire? I was trying to do more. Like practical execution. Show me the code. Like, what if I need to scrape something behind a form?
Yeah. That's what I was interested. I was interested really in a mashup of multiple data sources and reconciling alike, but not.
Man, mashups. Haven't heard that in a while, right? What's the word? We used to call it that all the time. Then we all stopped using that word for some reason.
Yeah.
We started calling them web apps for some reason. So the mashup was a web app.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Statement of work, you're close to it.
Also, what were the opening remarks on?
Fine.
Oh.
I didn't, did you hear me leave?
No.
No, I was like, I looked, the plenary, I was like, yeah, it's the data. My team director of Chicago, I was like, I didn't see that was entire. So then I went to Starbucks. Cindy sent me a note asking about the breakfast. I'm like, I don't have breakfast first. She said, well, let's go to City Winery to go have lunch. I was like, okay, so we went down there. They were closed for which they didn't have phones. So we ended up going to something else. Some folks in the other coast. Playing some things. she, I'm not really sure. But like, she took the day off, presumably to like spend with us, but then we were like, going to the conference and I thought, so much. So it's me to eat media after lunch, so I was like, well, I don't really want to go to the first session anyway.
Yes, that's why I didn't put them down as suggestions.
No. I know. One was like about